Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Baltimore City Public Schools Operation Committee. I want to welcome the community to our Operation Committee, July 17th, 2018. And I want to introduce you. We have our committee members here, and I'm going to get started. One thing I want to say, we have a very extensive agenda today, and it's really, really important that we move the meeting as swiftly as possible. Our meeting is from 10 to 11:30. However, we have a lot of work, a lot of conversation that we have to have within that time. And I would like to ask everyone who's presenting, could you please do as much as you can? We'll have questions, of course. And when you put your slides up, if you have slides to present, could you make sure that you don't read every single word, because we've already read the documents, and can kind of summarize, because, for example, procurement has a whole lot on there. We want to make sure we get everybody in, because we won't have another meeting until August the 24th. And that's really important. And if you have any questions throughout, we'll be happy to answer questions, but we want to move it, and I'd like to invite our first group of people up. That's vaccination plan, school year 2018 to 19. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. And when you come up, could you do me a great favor and introduce yourself, and so the public can see who you are. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. And every year we work on our vaccination policy and making sure that all the students are appropriately vaccinated in order for students to be able to enroll in the school system for the 2018-2019 school year. We've attached the vaccination requirements for school year 2018-2019, and I'm not going to go here and go over them again, but the Maryland State Department of Education and the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene had introduced new requirements several years ago, which they added by grade, so that this year they will be adding the 11th grade to the number of students who have to have Tdap and meningococcal, and last year they had, and then they will be adding the 4th grade for the varicella. During last year, we said we were able to create a new position called Immunization Associate, who was able to work out of my office and work individually with the schools to make sure that they had all the assistance they needed. People have this idea about the Tyke Immunization Clinic. Tyke was a very interesting metaphor that the Baltimore City Health Department had picked to describe their immunization program. It did not refer to a van. It referred to immunize kids expeditiously, and they called it Tyke. And they vaccinated 1,540 kids who were preschool and school age from 3 to 18. Also, we've included our school-based health centers and been able to receive a number of our kids being immunized right in the health centers that we have in our schools. As I said before, the Baltimore City Health Department has some of these acronyms, so they have a program they call BLISS, which is Baltimore Loves Immunized School Students. Their BLISS project, and they operated immunization clinics exclusively for city schools on Fridays. And they cross-match kids between Immunet, where doctors enter information in case parents didn't bring the appropriate information, and they updated the Tdap and meningococcal and updated this on a constant basis, which our immunization associate does as well. We're going to dispense our letters to parents reminding them that students can be excluded without appointments on September the 7th. We're going to allow temporary admission until it's December 24th for people who have an appointment and are set to be getting their immunizations. If we don't have this by the 20th day of school, they will be excluded the next school day. There are two reasons that students would be excluded from having, one is a medical exemption. You would be excused if you have a medical exemption that says that you can't be immunized at this time. And if parents declare they have a religious exemption, you would also be excused, and that would be documented on Form 896. A religious exemption simply requires a parent to state that that is a religious belief. Infinite Campus allows schools to run reports regarding students out of compliance and students who will be able to anticipate kids who will be out of compliance in the fall. There's a brief 2-week period when they can't do that while they're transferring from the new vaccination requirements for the 2018-2019 school year and going from there to the enrollment, which doesn't hit that until August. Our immunization associate is going to be supporting students and staff in our summer outreach. We're going to work with the partners to have free clinics in school buildings, and every year we start out with about 3,000 students who are compliant the day they leave 6th grade, but are out of compliance the day they enter 7th grade, which is one of our big pushes because they are in compliance when they leave school, but they're not in compliance when they come back. So, and then we've got the 4th and 11th grade requirement. There's a little piece in there that makes life a little more trying, is that if you had the bad fortune to be retained in 11th grade, and rather than going on to 12th grade, you not only didn't go on to 12th grade, but you were also required to have those immunizations that would have been waived for you if you had been in 12th grade. We sent information about our current non-compliant and compliant students to all of our principals and our school immunization coordinators. And we have been asking the principals and supervisors to contact parents over the summer break, and we have a list that we have sent to the schools identifying the students who would be out of compliance. The Baltimore City Health Department is going to have a school immunization clinic on Saturday, August 25th, which will take care of 100 students, and people are asked to call for an appointment. The tight clinic schedules are posted on the website, and they will be seeing students. And then on the Mayor's Back to School rally, right now it is set. It was tentative at the point when we first did this, but is now set for August 4th, and immunization will be available at the rally. Challenges are the timing of student retentions in summer school, because we really don't know exactly who's been retained until after summer school is over. Permission slip rate return in time for reports, and the documentation for legal exemptions. The other thing that's a challenge for us is the minimum tried between vaccinations, because we have students who come here either from out of the country or other school systems and are on a catch-up schedule, and the catch-up schedule doesn't always lend itself expeditiously to what we're doing in terms of Infinite Campus. So we work with the schools to make sure that they're not excluding kids who are really on an appropriate catch-up schedule. Questions?
Thank you. I got every word. And thank you for doing that. I had read, and I think that, but one thing, if you said it, I'd like for you to repeat it. The students are coming from out of the country. Do you have a special session throughout the semester or throughout the year where they can get the immunizations?
Yes, the immunizations are available at the health department. Mm-hmm. The Baltimore City Health Department will give immunizations regardless of students' status as illegal, illegal, doesn't matter what they are. Mm-hmm. School system accepts everybody who comes to enroll, mm-hmm. and the health department will provide vaccinations to all students who are enrolled in city schools. Okay. And the schedule is, they post a new schedule every month for the days that they're available. Okay. If they haven't seen the schedule and they're trying to schedule with somebody, they can call the health department. They'll tell them when they can come.
And they have walk-in?
They have walk-ins.
Okay.
The only time they try not to have a lot of walk-ins is on Friday, that they reserve for city schools, and so a lot of our schools will call and make an appointment to bring a group of kids. And we strongly encourage schools to do that when they have a group. You have to either bring parents or sign permission slips, because nobody can give a kid a shot without parent permission.
Right. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is that okay?
Commissioner?
You had mentioned that there is a period of time that people will have before they before school starts or after school has started. Can you say that again? Because you went through that pretty fast, and this is recorded, so I want to make sure people hear that.
All right, so if you have an appointment, and that was if you have an appointment, we're going to hand out those letters on the 7th, give people 2 or 3 days to come into school and for people to talk to them. So we're not going to exclude you if you have a letter. COMAR allows us that 20-day leeway, so we will not exclude you if you have a letter or an appointment. But if you get to that 20 days and you have not been vaccinated yet, then you will be excluded from school. I might add from there that even when we're excluding you from school, we do not send young children to walk home alone.
We do not send them where?
We do not send young children to walk home alone.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That was my greatest concern as well. Thank you very much. Okay, next would be Minority and Women Business Enterprise, MWBE program. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Brian Boone, and I manage the Minority Women's Business Enterprise program for city schools. I am in the office of legal counsel on the second floor, suite 208.
Okay, thank you.
MWB Department Purpose and Responsibilities. Sorry. The department was established to implement the board's program. The program was to provide maximum opportunities for women to participate and minorities in the board's procurement program. I'm going to not read it as you mentioned, but I will touch on several things. The department's responsible for setting goals, whether it's IFBs, RFBs, any proposals or bids that come in. We determine if goals are going to apply. We attend pre-proposals just to provide information to possible bidders on the program, what we're looking for in your proposal. We also evaluate bidders' proposals once they come in for compliance. We also do site visits, desk audits, and compliance reviews. And we also serve as mediators when there are issues between prime contractors and subcontractors. Sometimes it's related to payment issues or non-performance. It varies. And then we also report annually to the board a summary of what we've captured throughout the year for the program. Certification requirements. Contractors seeking work with the MWBE program must be certified with MDOT, the Maryland Department of Transportation, and Baltimore City's Minority Women's Business Opportunity Program. So we follow the state of Maryland's certification program and Baltimore City's certification program, depending on the funding. When projects are funded with state funds, we follow MDOT. And when they're funded with city funds, we follow Baltimore City. Brief definitions of what we, how we define an MBE or a WBE. Any legal entity except a joint venture that is organized to engage in commercial transactions owned and controlled by one or more individuals who have at least 51% ownership, whether you're a minority, as well as whether you're women-owned. It applies that you must have 51% ownership.
I want to go back, excuse me,
I want to go back as well, I'm sorry, because I skipped over.
No, I want to go back and ask a question. I have a question that Commissioner Hassan asked me to ask you, and I also would be concerned. She brought up a question about the minority women business and asked for the goals for the city and state, what is do you have a 5-year history of the meetings and the goals that you've set and how you can review those goals that you've had for that area?
We do have those numbers, not in this report, but we do an annual report each year where we have goals achieved and numbers, actual achievement for city goals and state goals over the last 5 years exactly, actually, since I've been here.
Okay, because at some point.
Yes, so we do an annual report, and that's in the report each year.
Okay, good.
Yes, to the board.
Okay, and it's a 5-year report or just a annual? Oh, the
annual
report.
Yes.
Okay, so if
we'll have one for this year. We've done it the previous years as well.
Madam Chair, can we ask for last year's report? Can we just get a copy of it?
Yes, you should have it.
I don't have it.
Okay. Okay.
And she's requesting, and she wants to look at the 5-year report. She wants to look at the 5-year report, and I think that makes sense. We want to look and see if we lay out goals, and we should be able to see how those goals are moving ahead, because we never accomplish all the goals in 1 year. But we'd like to see the goals. So it's in the annual report, you said, for each year.
Yes.
Okay.
So we have each year for the state, the goal is 29%, and for
Okay.
the city, the goal is 27% and 10%, and that's what we're shooting for each year.
Okay.
So we have what we've achieved and what those annual goals are, and those goals don't actually change.
Just
Yeah, sorry.
just
Okay.
once, just take back a copy of those of
Okay.
that 5 years so we can look at it. And it's really important because when we come to this operation meeting, sometimes, and maybe before, by August the 24th, even maybe that's not going to be our topic, but we're able to look at the goals for each year and see how you progress through those years.
Okay.
And see if we need to have a conversation about where we should be. Because
Okay.
we lay out these goals and we need to goals and rules and regulations and policies. We need to be sure that we're addressing those goals and we're meeting those goals. Because you know what I'm saying? When we come
Yes.
to the meetings, we talk about all our big goals, and sometimes we have so much to look at, we don't even think about, are we accomplishing those goals? And that's something that we should be reviewing.
Okay,
Okay? Thanks.
Can I ask a question?
yes.
Mr. Boone, when we say we follow the city program and the state program, the city program I'm familiar with, the state one I'm not, but with the city program, when you go through a budget, you're allowed to exclude things that may not or cannot be procured through a minority vendor, and you get to a different basis, a different denominator for a project, and then when you apply the percentages, it may be lower. Do we do that as well?
We apply percentages per project.
But do we actually exclude line items in a budget that cannot be procured by a minority vendor? Say, for example, a construction project, and there's a $2 million cost for elevators. Elevators you can't buy from minority vendors, so the city program will eliminate elevators with that $2 million line item.
I disagree. You can buy elevators from a minority vendor.
I was using an example.
Okay.
So let me pick another example. Some scientific equipment. I'm just making an example here. My question is, if there are items that for which there are no minority vendors, do you exclude that line item from the calculation of the goal?
Yes, but if we have a procurement and we see that the scope doesn't apply, then maybe we don't have a goal on that procurement, and maybe the goal is smaller.
Right. I'm familiar with that.
Depending
And that's
on-
a question I have later on about the exclusions
Right.
or the waivers, because there are many, including in this very large batch of procurements. There's very few goals set. But I was asking a different question.
I don't think we get into line items and exclude line items in procurements.
Okay, it's
Because that's what it,
right. The city does it. It's a policy that's more generous to the provider because it eliminates certain things. I'm not suggesting one is right or wrong. I was just curious if we did it. And you're saying you don't think we do?
no, I don't think we do that.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I wanted to go back. I skipped over just the different types of groups, and I wanted to say that African American, Asian American, American Indian, Hispanic, physical and mentally disabled individuals, women, nonprofits are listed, but they've been removed recently on the state side. So I just wanted to say that. I'm going to move on to the next slide. So MBE goals, the determination process. When applicable, the overall MWBE goals and sub-goals are set for each project. Generally, the following factors are taken in consideration: the extent to which the work can reasonably be segmented, or does the scope of work allow for subcontracting? Do we have MBEs and WBs on the certification list that do that type of work? Sometimes you can't find any, and sometimes you have more than you need. It varies. Sometimes on the state side, state certification, you can be certified with the state of Maryland and not necessarily be in Maryland. So the geographic location may apply. You may not be anywhere near our projects, and you may not be able to do this work. Sometimes we review the dollars. Sometimes we have contracts that have numerous awardees. You may have 5 awardees on a contract, and you look at the annual dollars, and when it breaks down, it may not be enough annually to subcontract. So we look at that as well. And then we also look at information from other LEAs to see how they do it, if we have questions, just to see how they may meet goals on certain contracts. If a determination is made, the MWBE goals don't apply. No goals will be assigned. This is not considered a waiver, just a determination which excludes the MWBE goal assignment process from the project or procurement process. Waivers only apply if requested by bidders when submitting proposals to procurement. I read that because there was a question about waivers in general. And when we're doing when we're determining if a contract has a goal, the waiver process doesn't apply. We're just determining, should this contract have a goal? Should we have MBE goals? So that's a different process. Determination procedures continued. The MWBE program focuses on setting goals. However, there are contracts where goals just don't apply. And there are several reasons why they don't apply, whether it's the dollars or the scope. And I just listed a few where we didn't set goals on them. We look at the scope, we look at the dollars, we look at the subcontractors available, and we determine goals don't apply. So we don't set goals. I just listed a few. For recycling and I want to make an example of skilled nursing. So we had goals on skilled nursing, and we awarded, I wanted to say like to 9 different vendors. And we found out that all of those vendors were MWBEs. And then they were subcontracting to each other. And we realized that's not what the program is about. So we would look at vendor A, and then they would subcontract to 2 other MBEs, and then we looked at vendor B, and then they would use the same, each other, to meet the goals. Typically, subcontractors aren't big enough to be prime contractors. So we look at that as well. You know, all of the primes, MBEs and WBEs, if so, maybe we don't need goals on that contract because the primes are actually large enough to be MBEs. I just wanted to make that point. So I listed a few more, like speech language pathology and student uniforms and special education services. We have a number of contracts where the program, it just doesn't apply. Yes.
I just want to ask a question, and only because as a layman, and you might have said it already, when you hire a contractor to do a project, like a big project, like a building, or you know, for example, one of our schools and all, do you, and you talk about the goals that they set, and they subcontract to minority contractors, do you track who they subcontract to?
Yes.
Because isn't that a part of the whole process that when they get the contract, they have to subcontract to?
That's a part of the compliance.
I'm just saying that's because I kind of know some of this already, but I just want to be clear because laws and things change. And does the subcontractor do subcontracting? And that's what you're talking about right now?
No, typically not. What I was talking about was on some of our contracts, we have multiple awards. And we may award to 5 vendors. And on this particular nursing contract, those 5 vendors happen to be MWBEs. All of the awardees were minority and women-owned contractors. So what we found in that case, they were subbing to each other to meet the goals. Right. But typically, on every contract, we do an MBE evaluation when bids are received from procurement. And in that evaluation, it lists who the subcontractors are, the percentages they are to receive, and we follow the dollar amounts of those contracts with those subcontractors. So yes.
So do you, when you give these contracts, do you follow up and make sure that they're doing what they said they were going to do?
Yes.
You have people that's evaluating that.
Yes, we have staff investigators that go out on site visits. We also do desk audits. We also have an electronic compliance system that we're using as well. So, yes, we do.
Okay, thank you very much. And Commissioner?
Again,
Frank?
because of my familiarity with the city program, I'm curious if we're following the same protocol, that prime contractors that are minority cannot count towards the minority participation. Do we follow that rule?
Prime contractors that are minority-owned can count towards 50% of the established goal for city-funded contracts. So let's say the goal is 27% for MBEs, and I'm a African-American MBE that's the prime contractor. So I can do 13.5 of that 27%.
Okay.
So you can self-perform if you are a prime MBE or WBE.
And was that a rule that?
Yes,
that-
there is a,
I mean, was that,
Baltimore
some-
City has a ruling that states that you can self-perform.
no, yeah, so I'm curious, again, because I think that makes a lot of sense. And I wasn't aware that Baltimore City allowed it. I was wondering, is this something that we modified the city program to?
So in the past, you didn't have self-performance for the city or the state. And the prime contractors used to say, well, hey, I'm a prime MBE or WBE. It isn't fair that I have to subcontract the entire goal. So that's where self-performance came in for both the city and the state of Maryland.
Okay.
So that has changed.
Good.
So we're going to move on to just city-funded, the program, or city-funded contracts that we review. For the most part, they're professional service contracts and construction rehabilitation contracts. Anything under $25,000 doesn't apply. We're only setting goals on contracts $25,000 and above. Firms participating have to be certified with Baltimore City's MWBE program. We do set goals on a project-by-project basis, and the goals may vary depending on the project and the work and the scope and the annual dollars. And the annual goal for city-funded projects is 27% MBE, 10% WBE. So that's what we're shooting for every year. State-funded projects are very similar, just that on the state side, typically they're construction projects and related to our 21st century. We're only looking at projects 50,000 and above. If you're going to be certified with the state, you go through MDOT, and that's what we follow, the Maryland Department of Transportation. Again, project by project basis, and the annual goal for the state projects is 29%. The waiver process. So we have two slides here for the waiver process, one for city-funded contracts and one for state-funded contracts. I'm going to try to summarize and not read all of it or read much of any of it. I'm going to give you a quick summary on what happened. So solicitations are on the street and bidders submit proposals. We receive those proposals. If you decide that I cannot meet that MBE or WBE goal, then you request a waiver. At that point, it's reviewed by my office to determine if your request for a waiver, if you've made a good faith effort. Let's say the goal is 27%, and you say, well, I can only meet 15% of the 27, and this is why. So we're going to look at, what did you do to meet the goal? Did you reach out to companies? Did you ask for bids? Did you send out emails? Did you make phone calls? We're going to request that information from you when you submit your bid. When you submit your bid on the city side, city-funded contracts, you have to submit all of your waiver information with it. If we determine that you didn't make a good faith effort, then we sit down with procurement and we decide that they didn't make a good faith effort. We're going to deny their request for a waiver, and we move on to the next lowest bidder. So those are city-funded. Yes?
Again, what are the main reasons to issue a waiver?
So let's say you request a waiver and you decide that, well, I just can't. A lot of times you hear stuff like, well, my company does all the work and we can't sub it out. That's not a good faith effort. We want to know that you reached out to companies, that you tried to reach out to companies to find companies to do the work, and companies either decided that their bid would be too high, or they wouldn't give you a quote, or they wouldn't call you back. We want to see that you made an effort. You just don't submit, we want a waiver, and we just decide, well, you ask for it, you get it. It doesn't work that way.
Can I ask a question
Yes.
about that process? So if the main contractor is looking for bids, and I don't know if you get this far in the weeds with them, but are there RFPs saying we want X number, this particular service to come and bid at $50,000, let's say, or are they allowing the subcontractors to work up the bid and submit what that item would cost. And the reason why I ask that is because if the first is true, if they're putting the dollar amount on what this service is, perhaps the subcontractors don't think it's enough in order to even bid. And so as you were vetting to see if that waiver is legitimate or not, I wonder if it's how the RFP was drafted. Could that be the deterrence of them getting legitimate subs in?
So when let's say we're doing a media center in a school, so we have a list of construction line items that shows how much the dollars within that project. So let's say it's $500,000, right? So in that $500,000, we have a 20% goal. So it's up to that prime contractor to meet that goal however he sees fit within any of those line items, right? We don't tell you have to do it in drywall or electrical or mechanical. You can meet that goal however you determine, right? So it's pretty flexible at that point for you to go out and find numerous subs or, a couple subs, but it's up to the prime to make that effort. So when we ask you for documentation, it says, well, prove to us that you made a good faith effort.
Right.
And then they say, well, we reached out to 2 companies.
Mm-hmm.
That's not sufficient.
Do you look at how they reach it out? So you're saying you make them
We
send
want
supporting
you to
documentation?
submit all your supporting documentation
Okay.
that proves that you reached out.
Okay.
And then we follow up
Okay.
and make phone calls and find out, did you call this company? And we've called companies, and companies are never heard from them. Or,
Right.
yes, I've heard from them. So it's usually it washes out, and it's easy to figure out.
Yes.
Chair, I know you're sensitive to time, so I can stop my questioning, but I have one more question. Okay, I'm curious in what you just said, Mr. Boone. If we receive 2 proposals, or say 5, for a bid, and the first one was the low bidder, low responsible bidder, except they didn't meet the target goals for MBEWB, and sought a waiver in the response, and the second bidder was not the low bidder, but did achieve the goals, how would you handle that?
Well, we receive it from procurement, and we do a review on what you submit. You're not penalized for requesting a waiver. Is that what you're asking?
Again, I only know other systems. In a case of City of Baltimore, the first bid that didn't meet the goals would be disqualified. It would not be given an opportunity to seek a waiver. Again, I'm not saying
let me say, it's 2 different things when you say.
Let me finish my question,
Okay.
and then your answers have been great. So, in the city, you aren't given the opportunity, and the city has to go by whatever rules to the second bidder. I'm just asking the question because I like the district program better. It shows more flexibility. It's more rational. So I'm just trying to understand where we differentiate from the city. I think it's important to know that. So that's my question about how we would handle those 2 bidders.
So I just want clarification. Are you asking if they didn't meet the goals or if they asked for a waiver?
They submitted a response and they didn't meet the goals and they asked for a waiver. The first bidder was the lowest bidder. Second bidder was the second lowest bidder but met the goals. I'm curious how the district would handle that review.
So, Jeff, you want to?
Good morning. So what we would do in that instance is based on the determination from Brian's office that they did not meet the goals satisfactorily, we would throw out that bid and go to the next bidder.
And then I didn't understand the waiver then.
You don't understand the waiver?
I didn't understand then. I misunderstood then what you said about the opportunity to give the lowest bidder a waiver as opposed to just being disqualified for not meeting the bid.
So
The
we're
goals.
going to review his waiver request,
Right.
right? And if we determine that his waiver request is denied, then we move on to the next
Is
lowest
that
bidder.
your understanding?
Yes.
Yes.
So a waiver request is, I reached out, I couldn't find anybody, you've verified that, and therefore we're going to go with you the lowest bidder because we accept your waiver and the reasons for it, as opposed to going with a second bidder who met the goals in the RFP.
So if we deny the waiver, we move on. If we approve the waiver, then we go with
So
the
I
waiver
guess,
request.
can
Yes.
I restate it
Yeah, please.
to see if I'm hearing you correctly? So the goals of the program is we want minority and women-owned businesses
Yes.
getting contracts with us. That's what we want.
Yes.
And so if in this example that we're talking about, your lowest bidder doesn't meet that percentage that we put out there, but your next to the lowest bidder does. So in terms of our overall goal for the program, the next to the lowest bidder does that for us. You're saying you would provide a waiver to someone just because they are the lowest bidder?
No, I'm not. I didn't state that.
Did I recapture that?
They said they would evaluate the
what I-
waiver, and if it was justified, they would grant it.
Right.
Let me restate. So if you request a waiver with your bid or your proposal, we review it and we determine whether your waiver is granted or denied, okay? If it is denied, we move on to the next lowest bidder.
But let's say it's granted, right? It's granted.
If it's granted, it's granted.
Right? But your next to the lowest bidder meets our MBE, WBE percentages.
And the city program would disqualify the first bidder no matter whether they requested a waiver or not. They would not be granted an opportunity even to submit a waiver request in their bid. Again, I'm not passing judgment. I'm just trying
I think
to
you're trying to understand the criteria under which you would accept a waiver, correct?
Well, that's exactly right. That's the, well,
Can I say something for the public,
we-
the community? When we want everybody to participate, the public would like to know who's participating. So real quick, when you come up to, Tammy, when you come up, let everybody know out there who you are, real quick.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thanks.
Good morning, Tammy Turner, Chief Legal Counsel.
So we don't just skip to the next bidder because we have someone else that met the goal. That's not necessarily fair to the initial lowest bidder. So we still have to review his request, right? You have to review it and make a determination, right? And that determination is going to go one way or the other. Now, I will say that we've granted very few waivers in the last 5 years.
Okay.
I would say less than 2.
Okay.
Oh, okay, one.
So let me say that out
Let's
loud.
start with
So
that.
you granted one.
And I'd have to go look and find it.
Right.
So the goal of the program is working.
Okay.
So no, you don't just skip to the next because you have others that met the goals. You still review that proposal and make a determination.
Okay.
I still think you're trying to understand what happens in the sheriff's office.
So, Jeff,
That misses the spirit of, to me, that misses the spirit of the program. If, you know, and I know that we don't encounter this much, so that's fine. But the spirit of it is that we want more minority and women-owned businesses doing business with the district. So
Yes.
it may cost us a little more to be committed to that goal. But in reality, it sounds like the dollar amount of a lowest bidder who, you know, comes in with the lowest bid, but they may need a waiver, that trumps any, that trumps someone having met the percentages of MBEW.
now be mindful. I'm sorry.
see today. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, say that
I
again.
think there were at least 4 waivers granted in the procurements we're going to see today.
Okay, I'm going to step in and we can hold this. Some of these questions that we have, would you like for them to submit some information that we can review? Because we have to move on, we're running
Well,
out of time,
Yeah,
your
I mean,
questions
we
are
heard it was
critical.
less than 2,
Mhm.
unless I'm misreading this.
And
there are
it says to.
But again, those could be
Those were goal
those could be
determinations.
waivers for one where there is nobody else that
Those
had
are
that.
goal determinations
But
where
does it say
where
that?
goals weren't
Yeah.
assigned to the contracts.
Okay.
Those aren't actual waivers.
Okay, if you, the commissioners might have more questions, and I think that we could put our questions in writing and submit to you, and maybe by the next meeting, or not by the board meeting, you tell us when you would like those questions answered. I would think you want them answered by before the next board meeting when we vote on them. Is that what you would like, Commissioner Frank?
Questions, which is rather confusing.
I don't have a question, but I would like to.
We'll just note that in the procurements, there are a lot of goals set, and they're set high, and the bidders met the goals, and I recognize that, and I do value the work that you've done and goals are set and they're met by the procurement process. I want to acknowledge that and thank you and your staff for achieving that.
Thank you.
Thank you. You want to move ahead and we're going to.
Yes. So
Thank you, Commissioner Franklin.
the next slide is very similar, just state-funded contracts. And the difference between state-funded contracts and city-funded contracts, when you submit your bid, if you are requesting a waiver, we actually reach out to you and request you to send in your documentation, and you have 10 days to submit your support documentation, and then the same process takes place. So with the state, you actually get 10 days to submit that support documentation. And on the previous slide, with city-funded contracts, you have to submit with your proposal. Your submission, your proposals are final. So I just wanted to quickly summarize on that slide. Cooperative purchasing, piggybacking. So I have Jeff Parker here to talk a little about piggybacking. Jeff?
So as the board knows, we oftentimes will refer to another district's contract when presenting a contract for your review and approval. The citations we use refer to piggybacking. That speaks to specifically using another district's contract. Typically, those goals, as it relates to MBE, are sometimes present, sometimes not present. And so what we do is we work with the MWBE office to determine to what extent the goals that are reflected in that agreement can be applied. Some instances there might be a contract in Texas that we're using, and that may not be applicable in terms of the MBE vendors that are in Texas being able to provide services in Maryland. But that's a decision we arrive at collectively and then bring those contracts to the board for their review.
Any questions on piggybacking? Some of the challenges that we encounter, some are just we meet a lot of companies that just aren't certified. They want to do work with us, but they haven't been certified. They want to bid on a current solicitation, and it's due in 2 weeks. So we get a lot of that. So we do things like outreach. We also, some of the other issues are some of the contracts are just too large for some of the smaller minority-owned companies. Sometimes when we do outreach, I find a lot of companies that I meet, they don't know much about what city schools has to offer. They mix city schools up with city government. So I always talk to them about, city schools is separate. Here's our procurements. Here's what we offer. Here's what we're looking for. And also, I've met companies say, I can't work some of the odd hours in some of the school projects, so I haven't bid on your work, which is our reality. So those are some of the challenges. We do numerous outreach. Every other year, we've tried to have our own sponsored outreach event where we bring in a bunch of contractors and reach out to a bunch of subcontractors throughout the state to promote Baltimore City Schools. And then we also attend numerous other, whether it's Baltimore County, Baltimore City, just to promote what we have here. And we always, or at least I always meet a bunch of companies that just don't know us. So we found that outreach is good. It's good to get out, it's good to meet folk, it's good to promote city schools.
I have one comment.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
One.
One, I promise. So, because I did read the last slide and I read about the outreach, and I want to challenge the school system, just like when I met Morgan, I challenged Morgan around the same issues. It's outreach and then there's training, right? And as much as we can figure out how can we get more minority and women-owned businesses prepared to respond to these huge RFPs, because it is it's a lot, right? And a lot of them don't have the training and aren't certified to do that. So if there are ways that we can collaborate with some of the other anchor institutions in the city to come up with a training that will help walk these business owners through ways that they can do business with these larger anchors, I would appreciate that. That's all.
Okay. So above is my contact information.
Okay.
If for any reason there are questions or I can be reached by email or phone call, I'm available, I'm here, and I'm willing and able.
Okay, thank you. You know, I just want to say for the committee, I think it's really important that we ask those questions, even though you have the answers, most of the answers there. It's a lot of information. The public is viewing it, and I think that it's important that we're clear on certain questions. And I'm sure that the commissioner would be open to, if they have more questions, they would have Christian to contact you and just ask questions and send it to us. It would be great. I appreciate it.
I think more clarity on his question is the difference between procurement and the MBE department and how we interact and when my department comes into play and when it's procurement. So I think that's where the conversation that we need to have just to clear up.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things I suggested to Mr. Boone is that we come up with some sort of flow chart, because many of the questions that were asked actually lies in the decision-making for the awarding of the contract lies in the procurement office. And so I think some of the confusion was Brian trying to answer a question that has many, many variables of which he may not be aware of, because his work, while it is interrelated to the procurement process, is not the sum total of the MWBE program.
And real quick, Tammy, I'd just like to say that this is an information session as
Right.
well, and we wouldn't have known that if you didn't say that. So now we know, so we can kind of differentiate between that when we have our next presentation in the future. And Commissioner
Real
Frank.
quick, and first of all, it's good to see Keith Scroggins back. Welcome. Commissioner Richardson's suggestion about building capacity, if you don't already know, Hopkins is working with Goldman Sachs, and they have their own Minority Builders College. And believe me, the institution of Hopkins would very much love for other institutions to be available to participate in this program. So when these now 30 companies that have gone through the program are looking for work, they're not just looking at Hopkins, they're looking at other institutions, and
Right.
maybe partnering with them would be a good idea.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your
Appreciate
time.
Next, please. The feasibility study, Commodore John Rogers Elementary Middle. Are you here? Okay, thank you. And again, could you identify yourself for us, and so that we and the public can, we know who you are, but we want everybody to be clear who you are. Thank you.
I'm already on here. Good morning. Commissioner Bondima, Richardson, and Frank. Good morning. I'm Sherry Vincent, the Interim Executive Director for the 21st Century School Buildings Program. Maureen Gershberg, our Senior Ed Planner, and the Director of Public Engagement and Community Engagement and Public Relations, Nicole Price. We are presenting two feasibility studies for you this morning, both of which Commodore John Rogers Elementary Middle and Highlandtown number 237 Elementary Middle are classified as addition only, which is unique within the program. We did this to address severe overcrowding in both of these schools in order to be able to move, in both cases, and middle school students into their own wing or addition. So the intent here was not to address the entire base buildings to the fullest extent that we would normally do under the 21st Century program. We had a very defined budget to be able to do just additions for these two buildings with minimal base building treatment. We will note, however, that in the case of Highlandtown, that's very successful because Highlandtown had significant work done on it in recent years, and so the base building is in relatively good condition. That is not entirely the case for Commodore John Rogers, and so we will explain what is unique there about the condition of the major mechanical systems in that building. Maureen?
Okay. And just to add to that, again, the reason why it's the 2 addition only projects is originally there was 1 project for Canton, and when that project got pulled, they divvied up the funds into the 2 different projects. Is that the pointer?
It doesn't.
Well, it'll move the slides though.
Oh, there you go.
Yep. So we're going to start with Commodore John Rogers Elementary Middle School. If we look at the context here, that's Patterson Park in the lower right-hand corner. Both of these schools are located in southeast Baltimore, which is where we see the majority of our overcrowding at our PK to 8 schools. The lot itself, you can see, is it takes up the entire city block except for that north side where we have some senior living and parking. So this is the existing site plan. There's 2 main components right now. A 3-story building, which is on the top part, and that is where the main entrance is. It's where the cafeteria, the gym is. And then the lower portion that's purple, that's where you're going to see your academic classrooms. So right now, your PK to 8 classrooms are all in that lower portion. There's parking behind that, and then an amphitheater that's not really used further back. There is a early learning center at this location. That's that peach color. It is it's associated with the school, and we were given specific instruction not to touch that, so we'll be leaving that alone. Their playground is that yellow shaded area, and then basketball courts are the orange shaded area. And that upper right-hand corner, that is that senior living that I mentioned, and then that white in the upper left-hand corner is their parking, so that's not our property. Oopsie, that went rather fast, okay. Okay, so this is the proposed site plan for our addition. That blue is where the addition would be. When we put forth the ed specs for this project, we had basically a list of the absolute necessary items, the number of classrooms we needed for the 6th through 8th graders, and then we had an additional list of things that would be really nice to have. And one of those was a gym of correct size. Their current gym is very, very tiny and difficult to use. So with this scheme, we're actually able to address the gym issue. So the blue that you see, it kind of wraps around a centerpiece, and that's going to be that gym with classrooms kind of surrounding it, and then classrooms as you get up. So currently PK through 8 is in that lower right-hand gray area. We would move the middle school to this new blue area so that the pre-K to 5 could fill that existing building in the lower right-hand corner. The amphitheater would go. Currently they're proposing parking in that upper left-hand corner. That does cut back on the amount of recreation space available for the students. So we will examine that further when we get into design to see how we can maximize the recreation space. Right now, the playground is located between the 2 buildings right next to that breezeway. This is the proposed plan for the lower level. In that lower right hand, you see the existing school classrooms and how they're kind of configured around the periphery of the circulation, which made it difficult to kind of tie into any additions. In the upper portion, you're going to see a dotted red line next to the giant gray box. That dotted red line is the existing gym, and you see it's a lot smaller than what we're proposing for the new gym. We would take those that square footage and break it up into 3 classrooms because we would have this new gym that could better serve the school population. And you're going to see on this level here, the classrooms wrapping around the gym. And that would be for 6th grade. This is the main level that you enter on. That red area is your office area. We would leave the purple, which is their existing auditorium. We're touching the cafeteria only in that we're removing some built-ins that were put in there. Once we remove those built-ins, they'll be able to serve more kids. That's a very minor piece to this. And then in our new wing, there's an X just because that gym is a double-story space, so we can't build on this floor in that area. But you see the 7th grade is wrapping around that space still. And then, again, we're not touching that lower right-hand corner where the existing building is. The next floor up, we have the 8th grade up on this floor, along with the 2 science labs. All right, and then that's it. These are the proposed elevations. Do you
Does it have a greenhouse?
There is currently no greenhouse planned for this. We occasionally have greenhouses as part of our high school educational specifications, but not at the younger level. They'll have community gardens or do some raised beds typically.
The reason why I was asking, that's the 4th floor, right?
This is the 4th floor, yes.
Because I was wondering, usually you put the greenhouse on the 4th floor. I didn't know if you had the small space for greenhouse. Okay,
That's not included in the program
okay,
now.
thank you.
All right, again, these are the, oh, do you have a question?
I do.
Okay.
So at $21 million, this is probably one of the least, if not least expensive 21st century projects?
So right now, as of now, we have not done any renovation-only projects, which we have 2 that we anticipate. So, yeah, but he's talking about money. So in terms of dollars for projects, I think those will be in a similar amount or less coming online later.
Is the existing building getting any renovation or spruce up or lighting or something to make it feels that it's gotten, some level of investment so it feels like a single space?
So 2 points. One is that, as Maureen mentioned, the original school that was in the program initially,
Canton building.
The Canton building, that was taken out at a specific dollar value. So the combination of both Highlandtown and Commodore John Rogers is just slightly over that number, but so we were trying to stay within that
Right.
price. The base buildings, in this case, would not receive new lighting or IT or any of those things. What we are looking to address, though, and have not quite figured out where we would be able to find the funds to do this, would be the mechanical systems in the base buildings at Commodore. They are nearing the end of their useful life, and so there are only so many sources of fundings that we might be able to use. One would be the Capital Improvement Projects Fund for city schools, which is already stretched pretty thin with the replacement schools that it is doing, as well as its normal CIP projects that are coming up. The other source would be from the program itself. And we don't know at this moment in time, although we will know very quickly, how much the remaining buildings are going to need to be able to be addressed.
Right.
The remaining 4 buildings.
I'd like to sort of, as a board member, go on the record as saying I think it's a mistake not to do what we can to find a little bit more money so that at least there's something addressed in the original building, whether it's color or light or paint or murals or something. Whether it's part of the capital program or whether we bring in that national nonprofit that picks 2 schools a year and raises money and does spruce up projects within the building. I think these are buildings for 21st century. These are buildings for the next 50 years. And I think for us to invest, I understand that we're limited in dollars, but I would say that the circumstances are unique enough here. The school is important enough to enrollment, to community development, that we dig a little bit deeper or maybe choices about something versus other so that these schools don't look like 2 different schools that were built obviously at 2 different times, and whether there are things that can be done to tie the 2 schools together or graphically, architecturally, whatever, that don't cost a lot of money but give some thought in both buildings and you feel like you're part of the same school. So I would encourage you to think about that, or I would send it back as a message, at least from me. I don't know about my colleagues.
And we would certainly be sensitive in final design to creating the same character for the exterior facade of the addition, but I understand what you're saying as far as
Well,
not
that's
just.
unfortunate too,
Well-
because the character of the existing building is limited, and you're not doing anything to that. But I'm not an architect, so we won't get into that. I trust that process works very well. It has, and I won't meddle in that. So, anyway, those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
I have just
Duly
one more
noted.
question,
Yes.
and I'm only asking this as a scientist only. And we talked about state-of-the-arts and 21st century. And my first question, we only put greenhouses in high schools, is that true?
Yes, so even then, it's not a guarantee at all high schools. It's just something that if it's currently there, we potentially work with the programs to make
Right.
sure that it's involved, integrated into the ed specs early on in the process, but we have not put in, we don't put in greenhouses at the lower levels, no.
And the reason why I'm saying it, because I built a greenhouse in one of the schools in community college, and it doesn't take much space. And when we talk about state-of-the-arts and looking at the future for our kids, it is a wonderful addition that would be connected to our science labs or our science. And I'm not sure, I'm saying this because I'm sure that you've laid out the plan, and it sounds like you might not have the space, but it could be something that you need to think about, because when we talk, it's happening all over the place. So just think about it. I don't know how far you can get at this point, but it would be great to show that we have a state-of-the-arts school that includes a greenhouse that the children can participate in, and what a wonderful thing to show that we're looking at that. And it actually is old science. They've been doing it for a long, long time. So if you could please just think about it and find a space that's connected to maybe whatever, connected to your labs.
So we do incorporate into our ed specifications for ideally the science labs to be facing a certain direction so that they can put planter boxes out and they can grow things within the science labs. One of the, it's not necessarily the square footage that often makes greenhouses more complicated. It's also the infrastructure required for them, because you need to run electricity and water out there. And then if we put them on a roof, oftentimes there ends up being leaks around those. So it's, oftentimes it's not even the square footage necessarily that is kind of a big driver, but we definitely incorporate those end goals of, again, being able to work with the environment, having a weather station into our PK to 8 ed specs within the science labs themselves.
Thank you.
Yep. Are there any other Commodore questions?
The only thing I would just want to reiterate what Commissioner Frank said. I truly believe that we did just paint in a building, in one of our school buildings in Bel Air Edison, and the mindset of the kids when they walk into just fresh paint makes a difference. So whatever we could carve out and do in the old space, I would really support that.
Okay, we're going to move on to Highlandtown 237. If you look at the context here, so now we're on the other side of Patterson Park in the northeast, just northeast of Patterson Park. Highlandtown 215, also overcrowded, is actually just a couple of blocks to the west of this. If you can kind of see from here, again, this takes up the entire lot, similar to Commodore John Rogers. And on the west portion, you have the building itself, and on the right portion, you have a green space, which is a much beloved community asset. So one of the goals as part of this addition was maximizing that green space, or preserving it as much as possible. So this is the existing site plan. You'll see again that green space on the east side. On the west side, the light orange was the original 1926 building, and that's where you enter from off of, I can't read the street name, it's tiny, but you enter straight into the center there off that street. The purple is, I think, a 2006 addition that included the gym, and so that wraps around the back. And the orange is the latest addition. However, so that was previously a senior center that then City Schools absorbed that into their portfolio. So while it is technically the most recent addition, the building itself isn't in the best shape necessarily. It's a one-story structure that currently houses the early learners. And then you have service on the south side where that gray area is. Okay, here we show where the demolition will be. So we're proposing to demo that senior center. Again, I said it's not really in the best of shape. It doesn't really maximize the site that much, so we would demolish that. And then the additions, there's a small, it has a small footprint, but I believe it's 3 stories in the lower left-hand corner on the front. And then for the top portion, what we're proposing, because the gym and a couple of the classrooms that are, I think, on top of it now are in good condition, the addition would stretch across the street, straddle the gym, and then continue on into the back. So if we look at the lower level, this is not the level that you enter on, this is below that, but because of the grade change on the site. So you see on that teal area, that's the existing cafeteria, and we're proposing to extend it further with that addition that we pointed out in that lower left-hand corner. The gym is blue, so that's staying, that's good to go, and then we start seeing the addition in the upper right-hand corner of classrooms.
Which is the addition, the blue?
No, to the right of that, where the red dotted line is, to your right and up. And then in that lower left-hand corner as well. All right, so this is the main floor that you enter on. Again, you enter from the west into that dark orange area. We start to see the addition where that senior center used to be. It's now to the left of the gym, and then more addition to the right. And again, in that lower left-hand corner, more addition as well. And these are going to be, since we're replacing the early learning wing there, those classrooms in the upper left-hand corner are early learning classrooms. The addition is going to be primarily 5th through 8th grade. Commodore was 6th through 8th grade. So here, I believe it's the 5th grade that you see in that addition in the upper right-hand corner. If we keep going, here I believe we have the 6th and 7th grade, and this is the portion that is all on top of, this is the part that goes over top of the gym. And then we keep going. Oh, sorry, so that must be the 6th through 8th is up here. And then we have, again, that additional space in the lower left-hand corner as well. And then the rest is the existing building, which we're not touching. Here are the proposed elevations. So if you see those dotted red lines coming down, those are going to be additions on the left side and on the right side of that. And that's going to be your main entrance, that top one.
Just a question.
Mm-hmm. It is a lovely, beautiful building.
I do, again, pretending that I know the architecture. With the limited funds that we have here, and the small, relatively small addition, at least in the front, I would just encourage that we do what we can to be sort of different, exciting, and bold, and colorful, not to try to replicate what's there, but something in contrast. And I think 21st Century Schools has been fantastic, but there's also opportunities when we do smaller additions to do something interesting and different, particularly in facades, that makes sense and not be traditional in our approach. So the suggestion as you think about architects is next step.
Okay. Is this it? Okay. There might be a slight chance it's a historic building.
What?
There might be a slight chance it's a historic building.
Oh, even so, the trust would encourage something that's different and not try to replicate it.
Hmm.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, procurement.
I don't know, did they get the questions? They got the questions.
Yeah, they did. He sent a notice that they had received it too.
Did you get them?
Good morning.
Good morning, members of the board. Jeff Parker, Director of Procurement. Would you like me to go through each one, or?
Well, quickly.
Okay.
And I think that we've added, and Commissioner Frank and Ellen or Richardson, they might have questions, but
Right.
we have gone over it.
Great, thank you. We have Commissioner Frank's questions.
I hit a couple of toward the end, but let's see how things go, okay?
All right. So the first procurement item, 9.01, is a contract with the Family League in the amount of $111,277.13 to support the training of 15 supervisors, 5 coaches, and Family League support staff for this summer's Youth Works program. Are there any questions?
You want me to just read my questions, or did you want to address them?
Let's address them.
Well, the first one was, I talked to the chair about this procurement, or this activity has already started, number one. Secondly, do we have to approve this retroactively to cover the time that was when the contract started and our approval?
It's my understanding they're providing services, Commissioner, so yes, we would have to. The contract effective date would be, as reflected here, June 20th.
My next question was, so did I understand the math that we're spending about $200,000 on Youth Works?
Commissioner, no, I'm Jim Brennan, Executive Director for the Chief of Staff. The real total, in the answer was provided, was 245 students across 10 sites, plus central office.
Okay.
This morning, I received a corrected number of 316 total students being served by Youth Works through city schools.
So this contract from Family League, I was confused by the second paragraph. It said we'll provide for the hiring of 60 youth, $90,000, and then I added the cost of Family League. So that number is much higher, 300 and some.
No, last year, there's 2 aspects to this.
Okay.
One is our direct payment for the 60 students who work right here in central office.
Right.
That last year was $90,000, which was $1,500 per student over the course of the summer. This year, MOED raised it to $1,600, which raised the total price of paying our students $96,000.
Okay. So the cost of supporting the 60 students that are working here and being paid is $90,000 plus 111, or is that 111?
No. It's not, this year it's $96,000.
Right.
The 111 covers all 316
Okay,
students, including our 60.
Thank you.
Okay.
And the 96,000 was approved at the previous board meeting in June because we knew that amount. We did not know the amount for Family League at that time.
I have a couple of questions to ask. Part of the questions are coming from Commissioner Hassan that she sent to me to make sure I ask. I was a little bit confused on many of the programs that's going on have already occurred and have already ended. And I get, as a person who run programs and all that, I'm not sure of how that occurs. Why do we run programs before the board approves the programs? And, wait a minute, 1 second. And because it's not a question of the need, that's not the question.
Right.
But I'm concerned with some of the programs that we're running and completed. Why weren't we approving and looking at it in the spring or moving into before the program started? Because one of the concerns of the commissioners that sent to me, that it looks like we're rubber stamping programs and not understand what's actually going on. Could you just explain to us what's going on with that?
The situation this year was complicated by, in the past, MOED, through the mayor's office, paid and contracted with the Family League as part of their contract. This year in the spring, they requested of the College and Career Readiness Office, which is who overlooks this, that we pay the Family League directly, the district, rather than paying them and they pay Family League. At that point, we then had to the CCR office had to negotiate the contract with Family League because they saw an opportunity to save some money. By the time we got they received the contract from the Family League, it was late May, and they still negotiated it and were able to get savings of $8,100 off the previous contract. Unfortunately, by the time they finished negotiating it, the June 12th meeting had already occurred, so we didn't have the number to bring in. Dr. Pfeiffer, when I spoke to her about this, indicated that she's aware of it. They thought it was important enough to get the right contract with Family League to cover this program, and that she would ensure that in the future she would have the number well in advance of the program starting. It was kind of a situation where we didn't anticipate that MOED would want us to contract directly with Family League because we hadn't in the past. And then Dr. Pfeiffer, having just come back from maternity leave, had questions about certain aspects of the program that she wanted answered. And she thought the pricing could be better, which it turned out it could. So yes, they apologized. They recognized and apologized that the program had to start prior to being finalized, but this year was a little different than past years.
What happens if the board doesn't approve?
Commissioner, I honestly don't know. I don't know.
So in the future, could we at least have a heads up that there's a delay in this particular contract, but that we should be expecting it, and maybe getting some approval to start in advance or something like that?
Absolutely. Again, Dr. Pfeiffer has guaranteed that she will deliver it on time next year. But in our submission at the June meeting for the MOED portion of this, we did note what was going on in terms of Family League being taken out of that contract and being renegotiated, which does not excuse the fact that it was late, but it was somewhat of a heads up.
And if I may add, you know, it's certainly the district is required to have these contracts before the board in a timely manner. I would say that these contracts, a large percentage of them were ready. Unfortunately, the summer schedule that we have in terms of the limited amount of board meetings that we have does sort of that, plus all of the work that goes on in the summer for all of these contracts, puts a huge burden on the organization in general to get all these materials completed and to you on time.
I don't know how the other board members feel about that, but when you talk about such a large amount of funds and the need to move programs that are successful programs, to move them quickly, maybe at some point we might consider having an emergency meeting to review all of the things that, I mean, because it doesn't sound like we're in order when we run programs without getting approval of the board. You understand that, right?
Absolutely.
And so I don't know if the board would approve this. I'm just saying as a board member, that I think that at different times things happen and we have to get emergency board members in. We've done that before and see, yeah, we've done it, so it can happen. But I would recommend, so this never happens again, that we run programs, fund money that we have not, has not been approved. And let's see what happens next year.
Okay.
Maybe we can know in advance so we can get this out of the way and not ever happen again. Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We're going to continue moving on. I just checked with the position. We're going to see how far we can go.
So the next contract is with the Mayor's Office of Employment Development. It's regarding the YO Youth Opportunity Academy. It's a credit recovery program The cost of the program is $205,076. The contract also includes the one-year lease on the space at 1510 Lafayette Street. And we have some people here to answer your questions. Commissioner Frank.
Thank you. I had two questions. I read this a couple times, and I know you guys typically do a great job of explaining these programs. I was just confused. One is, early on in the write-up, it talks about credit recovery for 9th and 10th graders, and then later on it talks about the focus is on graduating seniors. And then I don't know what credit recovery means. I just generally don't know what this scope is we're focusing on, and if you could just really quickly describe it for us.
Good morning, board members. I'm Roger Shaw. Good morning. I'm Roger Shaw, Director of the Re-Engagement Center and Work with Alternative Programs. The Youth Opportunity Program is a program to serve our students who we have been re-engaged, who have dropped out. Some have dropped out. Some are coming out of incarceration. Some are coming out of placement. Some are coming from just places where they have had acute crisis. And so Youth Opportunity is the school we send them to when they have less than 5 credits, right? To become a 9th or 10th grader, you need 5 to 10 credits. These students, because of life challenges, have less than 5 credits. So many of them have 1 or 2 or 3 credits that we try to engage. If we don't engage them in a program like Youth Opportunity, then they kind of default back to dropout status, and then we have to remotivate them. So when it talks about 9th and 10th graders, many of them don't have the credits to be actually a 9th or 10th grader. So we start them off in a 9th grade kind of like program to get them the core courses in math, English, social studies, and science. And that's what Youth Opportunity does. So when we say 9th and 10th graders, we're speaking of credit. When we look at their credits, they are mainly should be 9th graders, but we know we have to get them there. And based on when they accumulate the credits, they either can stay at Youth Opportunity, and then we could move them to a more accelerated program in one of our other programs to graduate them before they age out. Many of these students are 18, 19, in some cases 20. They do not want to pursue the GED process, and so this is our way of saying we're going to give you the opportunity to recover credits. So recovering credits is a way of the courses that they fail, a way to help them capture those credits through an APEX model, blended learning, or face-to-face interaction.
Just explain, so your focus there is on 9th graders or incoming 9th, 10th. Then it says the focus of the academy will be graduating students with a high school code. So the goal is for YO to actually take them through completion, or they would return to a city school and then ultimately graduate with a diploma? So
yes, but there's some nuances there, Commissioner. Okay. And some of the nuances are, when we say the focus is 9th and 10th graders, we probably should go back and reword that a little clearly, is that it's about the credits in terms of them accumulating credits to become a 9th or 10th grader. Once they get enough credits, 1 or 2 things can happen. They could kind of stay at YO and continue their education through online learning and some blended instruction, or we can send them to another alternative school where they can accelerate their learning because we want to get them before they age out.
So just to add to that, it all depends on the age of the student. So if we have a 17-year-old 9th grader that comes in the building and they're recovering courses, even if they recover enough courses to be promoted to the 10th grade, they're going to be 18 years old and in the 10th grade. So that student would actually stay at Youth Opportunity. But just to piggyback on what Mr. Shaw said, as you know, students cannot stay in school after the age of 21. So if there's a student that is on track to actually turn 21 before they've received all their credits, then we may look at another one of the alternative programs that's on a trimester schedule where they can even recover their courses faster.
One last
question. I'm sorry, and I'm Dr. Tanks, I'm the coordinator. My apologies.
One last question, again, picking up on the chairwoman's comments about approval of projects after they started. This is a contract term of July 1st to July 1st of next year. Have we actually signed the contract?
No, we have
So we've
not.
started without a contract with, they're sort of allowing the board to catch up, or?
For the upcoming year, we have not started the
It says July 1st, the contract type, the contract term is July 1st of
Right.
2018, July 1st of 2019.
Right.
So I'm just asking
So,
how that works.
so we're informing the board that that's the contract term.
Right.
And then pending the board's approval, then we route the contracts for signature. But we cannot execute a contract until the board has approved a contract.
Thanks.
That's all I have.
Just want to mention, I think I mentioned this a long time ago, but I want to get this out. The information that you're giving right now is really good information, and it would really save time if you, at some point, if you could, it would be nice to have a sidebar of a sheet or something to let us know some of this information that you shared, and it'd save all of this time, because some of the questions that Commissioner Frank asked is just general information that we as laymen who don't know some of this, we know some of it, but you went into more detail about what it was, and it could save a whole lot of time if we had
Yes.
some of that information before.
Yes, Commissioner, we have a one-pager that we can send you that explains our alternative.
In advance about,
Yeah.
for each meeting, when you're presenting,
Yes.
it would be nice if we could have that. It would save so much time. We would have read it, understood it, and we could move on.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Is it I did have one more question quickly. Under results, we talk about the goal attained of 44, for example, the attendance goal is 80%, what was attained was 44%. Do we pay based on results or goals, and am I overthinking this? Does it really matter? Do you understand the question? We don't have time for this.
So we pretty much pay at the same rate that, that we pay all of our other alternative programs in schools, and that's with the AOP supplemental, if I am correct.
I guess my question is, the way the contract is set up, if we have a goal of 80% attendance and say only 44% show up, are we paying the vendor based on the goal or the actual?
Just the actual contract.
Okay, thanks. Well, never mind.
Thank you. I'm going to move this swiftly. Like I said before, we've read this, and so what I would like for you to do is start going down the line, and any commissioners at this point that need to ask a question, can you?
Well, my questions are written down, so if you want to, some of them are more important than others.
Okay, so when we get to that section,
Okay.
you can ask your question. But we're not where your questions are right now.
We've also taken those questions into consideration, and we'll include the answers and responses in the July 24th agenda of the board. We'll see you later.
Is that good enough for you?
Yeah, I might pick one or two.
Sure.
Thank you.
The next contract is with ProQuest. It's an online database in the amount of $35,565. We have staff here ready to answer that question for you as well.
No, just if you could expand the write-up for the next step.
Essentially, it's an online electronic database that the schools have access to. It's about $6,000 for each database, and so we'll go into further discussion about that.
Thanks.
The next contract is with Kennedy Krieger to provide an extended school year program this summer. The cost for this contract is $323,592. Moving on.
So you'll answer those questions in the next? Okay.
Yeah. Is the Villa Maria public, non-public partnership. The cost for this is $324,370.50. Provides services for students with individual IEPs for kindergarten through the 8th grade. The cost per seat is $64,874. Expanded school mental health program. As it pertains to your question, there are 38 full-time and 88 part-time providers of these services. The estimated annual amount is $2.1 million.
Chair, you have a question, and more questions, Reps.
No, thanks for that. Does every school have a full or part-time mental health professional?
I don't believe so. Louise?
We have a total of 126 schools covered.
Total of 126?
Right. All of our schools have mental health presence in the terms of they're having either a school psychologist or a school social worker. But this program, which is a collaborative program with mental health agencies, is at 126 schools.
That's, how are they selected? How were they selected?
They were selected 4 years ago by looking at school need in terms of attendance, suspensions, referrals to special education, and achievement. And they were told at the time that we would not change the schools each year because we would give them time to work with the schools. This is an extension of the original RFP based on some fiscal issues that have come along. And that we will be selecting another group of schools for an RFP process this coming year.
Yeah, I for one think this is fantastic. I mean, we could always have more. In fact, we probably need more. But with all that we hear from others on the board and elsewhere about trauma and other issues our kids face every day, having mental health professionals in the schools as important as having teachers. So
we've been very fortunate. We have been actually cited by Medicaid as one of the outstanding programs using Medicaid dollars along with school system dollars expeditiously. So we're providing a program where the money the school system is giving us is leveraging about $7.5 million for our students.
terrific. In Medicaid. Yeah, great. Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. The next contract is with Naviance to provide a career and college access service. The contract's for 5 years. It's a continuation of an ongoing contract we have. It's $715,235.20. I didn't see any questions there. The next contracts all pertain to a number of benefits for school system employees. The first is a contract with Beacon Health to provide an employee assistance program. The contract amount is $256,200.
Very quickly, I will just note that this contract and many of these do have MBEWB goals, and we're glad to see it.
Correct. The next contract is with Hartford Life to provide life insurance, accidental death insurance, disability insurance, et cetera, for the schools, employees, and their dependents. This contract amount is $1,940,560. The next contract is with PA Administration Services to provide flexible spending and COBRA benefit account management services to city schools. This is a 2-year contract extension and a request to the board for $100,000 to cover those 2 years. The next contract is with Care First of Maryland for 1 year to provide dental services. The estimated annual amount is $4.8 million. And again, the period would be January 1, through December 31, 2019. The next contract is a 5-year agreement with 3 3-year extensions. This provides a medical point of service plan for our employees and their dependents. With Care First, the estimated cost for the 5-year program is $288,351,000. The next contract is with Care First of Maryland. This is to provide a PPO plan. Again, the 5-year estimated cost is $318,671,000. These benefit contracts will all go into effect January 1 of 2018. The next contract is Prescription Drug Benefit Program. This is with Express Scripts. This contract is for a 3-year term. The estimated cost is $87,465,000.
Obviously, these are large procurements that affect tens of thousands of people. I will say for myself, this is so over my head, the process of actually having a process and selecting and overseeing, and yet we're supposed to oversee contracts like this. So if you could think about ways to educate those members of the board that really don't know how to provide oversight to something like this, basic questions of how do we actually procure them? How are their costs compared to others? How do we make these decisions? I mean, it is inherent, but some of even that is sort of over my head. So maybe between now and the board you could think about a way to help sort of explain the decision-making process in writing, so that we can understand what went into it, what is our very, very large contracts.
Right.
Thanks.
The next contract is with Kaiser. This is to continue. We currently provide an HMO plan to a number of teachers and their dependents. The cost for this contract is $38,250,000. This is over a 5-year period. The next contract is with National Vision Administrators to provide a vision program for city schools. The request before the board is to extend the current agreement for an additional 2 years through December 31, 2020. The estimated cost for this entire term is $3,622,571. The next contract is to renew a number of software maintenance, support, and licensing agreements that are required by IT. These contracts run on an annual basis. The total amount of the agreements are $3.9 million. And these are services we typically renew every year. The next contract is with E-Rate Elite Services to provide consulting and project management services. This is a request. The current contract amount is $85,000. This is a request for the board to increase that contract by $24,500. The next contract is to permit the board and the district to utilize the State of Maryland contract for IT services. The estimated annual amount is $1,200,000. And this is to provide staff to IT that we currently do not have on payroll as needed. The next contract is with Blackboard. The amount is an increase to the existing contract of $154,639.54. This amount was budgeted. The budget allocation for the contract is $200,000 in plan, and it's in the budget for FY 2019.
Question on this one. On the others, you did actually, when there was an increase in amount, you did include the funding implication.
Right.
In this one, I didn't see it. Or, no, it's right there. Okay. Does it say where I missed it. I'm good.
All right.
Thanks.
The next contract is for school bus transportation. So the first contract is for $148 million, approximately $149 million. Jeez. This is a 5-year contract with 11 contractors to provide 273 daily bus routes for the district.
And yeah, if you could provide answers to the board of my questions here. Okay.
Note that even though the contract term says July 1, these services really begin at the start of school.
Answers provided by when?
I guess they'll be provided.
By the next board meeting?
Either written into the revised procurement write-up or provided in some other way. Christian, I don't know how best to do that. So.
Okay, but do you want it available by the 24th? Okay.
Yeah.
Did you hear that?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Not necessarily, if the write-up explains. Yeah.
I mean, it might be a mixture of both.
Right.
As it relates
some
to
stuff.
Transportation, it might be a write-up for the board.
Yeah.
The next contract is also school bus transportation services. This is with an additional 7 contractors to provide an additional 96 daily bus routes. The total cost of this agreement over 5 years is $51,573,312. The next contract is with Burrell Motor Coach. This is to also provide bus transportation services specifically for summer school. The contract amount is $375,000. This was an emergency procurement approved by the CEO so we could provide services for students at the commencement of summer school. The next contract is with LJW to provide rental service for roll-offs. The estimated amount is $375,000 for the total term of the agreement. The next contract is with IO Education to provide feedback surveys. 3-year term is July 1 through June 30th, 2021. Estimated annual cost is $54,799.20. I didn't see any other questions.
This is another incident right here that started before we did the approval.
Let me research that further.
Okay.
See whether or not services have actually commenced. I've been told services have not commenced. So we can revise the start date to July 25th. We'll revise the start date to July 25th.
Okay, thanks.
The next couple of contracts are to provide additional professional development services as well as new teachers, teacher retention, coaching effectiveness. This is with New Teachers Center. This is a 2-year agreement and the total amount of $270,200. This provides specific specialized professional development to 280 current mentors that support 1,500 to 2,000 new teachers. The next contract is with the New Teacher Project to provide the Baltimore City Teacher Residency Program. The total cost of this is $661,500. The next contract is with Urban Teacher Center. The contract amount is estimated at $2.3 million to provide up to 92 teacher residents. It's funded from a portion of Title II, Title I, and general funds.
Title I.
The next contract is with Colleen Reyes to provide training and professional development services. The contract amount is $40,600. And the next contract is with Notre Dame to provide the New Teacher Summer Institute. Total cost of this is $39,312.50. Next contract is with James Watham. This is an increase to continue to provide negotiation services as it pertains to the collective bargaining agreements with CUB, Local 44, and the Fraternal Order of Police. This is an increase of $36,900. And then lastly is a contract with Access 411 to provide a comprehensive attendance administration program as well as a visitor access system for city schools. The contract term is July 1, 2018 through June 30th, 2019.
Okay.
Mr. Parker, just if you could speak generally to these large contracts, the transportation contracts and the pension, or the benefits contracts. Sounds like a simple question, but are all of these within the budget, in the budget, and within the budget estimate?
So as it pertains to all of the benefit contracts, yes. As it pertains to transportation, I'm not totally, I can't answer that question for you specifically with total accuracy today.
Okay.
I do know that we have, a lot of this is dependent on the trade-off between how many students we put in cabs versus how many ride yellow bus, and then how many vendors are actually able to provide services in buses versus those that.
Right. I might be oversimplifying. I'm just curious if we're overspending our budget in transportation or in these benefits, but maybe that's another question for the next, for the board. I'm done. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I just have to go back to one question. It won't take a minute. One of our board members, Dr. Hassan, who's not here, she asked a question, and when I reviewed it, the Kennedy Krieger Institute question, all the way back. And she had that, and I failed to ask it, because right now I don't understand it. She's asking, the question is, if we are no longer planning or partnering with them to serve the students at Lois Murray, what is our plan for transition of services? But when I read this, we are working with them. Isn't that true? We're not leaving them. We're not transitioning them from them.
So my understanding is that we're transitioning away from Kennedy Krieger.
Right.
Part of that transition is for them to provide those services to us over the summer.
Right.
But that City Schools plans to pick it up after that.
Okay, we're going to pick it up. Okay, I think that was the concern.
I'm pretty sure I got it.
Okay, thank you so much. And again, thank you, and I want to say thank you for everybody staying and sitting through all of the work that we had to put out today, and we did get through it, because the good thing about it, we read it before we got here, so that's a good thing. We just had some questions about some of the things, and I think that you're going to assure us that we will get the answers to some of the questions that Commissioner Frank and Commissioner Richardson had for us. Our next meeting is August the 21st at 10 o'clock to 11:30, and the community can look at the meeting online on TV, and if they have any questions, they can submit those questions online. Any questions from the commissioners? No. Okay, and thank you very much, and have a great rest of the summer.